when we had, myself and my wife had 2 young children, and we had been teaching in the university system in Dubai, in the Middle East. And by the time we'd finished, we decided to go back to Australia, and that's where we would raise our family, and that's what was going to happen. And then after 2 years, we both got the expression in English as itchy feet. Yeah? We wanted to go elsewhere. And we had 3 different options. We could either go to Brunei, or we could go to Turkey, because that was another international school which we could have gone to, or we could have gone to Hong Kong. And we just liked the sense of the energy of Hong Kong. I think I've worked in 6 different countries, in the tertiary sector, in the secondary sector, and in the training sector. And this was the only place, I think, where I felt home. I remember actually interviewing for the job with Mr. Ha and the current principal, Mr. Dennis Yun. And the thing that struck me was how student-centered the materials were as you walked through. As you walked up the stairs, there were photos done by students, there was artwork by students. It was a very visually arresting place. It immediately, I had a sense that good things were going on. So before I'd actually even been employed, I thought, this is a really interesting place. And then my first day, when I saw the students all singing hymns in the morning together, and actually singing, they weren't mouthing the words, they were actually singing something, I thought, this is fantastic, I can't believe this. And then as time went on, I did recognize that there is something, there is some essence, there is some spirit, there is some intrinsic value in what's being done. Yes, you do have academics, but you have all of the other ones, which leads to character formation. People talk about the St. Paul's spirit. And I think that the truth of the matter is, all schools have their own iteration of this idea of spirit. But if we look at St. Paul's, there is something special. There's no question about that. And I'd put it down to a really strong conglomeration of academics, sport, music, and service. That everyone has to do something in all of those areas. And I think the level of support between students is extremely high. We had a movie club, and we had English Fun Day. We'd have poetry competitions. There was interclass debate competitions. I think you have to make it something which is going to be enjoyable and motivating for junior students, because as I mentioned earlier, by the time that you get to senior school students, the focus is going to be different, and they're going to have to be much more geared into an exam mentality. But in the junior forms, you can really access language much more easily. And I think just one that we put in last year, the principal's book, wherever on the student's birthday, then they're given a book for their family to use. So I think every year there's some new initiative which we're constantly looking to change, improve, tinker, alter, amend those things which we've done. In the past, I don't think that when it was an aided school, the facilities were pretty basic, you'd have to say, and it was quite difficult to move anyone in any different ways because there was no modular furniture. There was no way in which we could have things run student-centered work. It was very hard to do group work. It was very hard to have student presentations. I think that over the course of the past 20 years, during Mr. Ha's time, it was the movement from aided school to DSS school. Then Dr. Kennard was very strong on the global classroom, and Mr. Yun with campus enhancement. Each person has put their particular footprint on one part of the school's essence. And I think that's something that goes a long way. It really changes how we feel about the place.
So can you share about why would you take the initiative in organizing the IEL? And what inspired you to provide this curriculum for students?
Yeah, that's actually it's a fairly long question. It starts back to Mr. Ha's time, but primarily in Dr. Kennard's time. It was, are we going to go with the IB, or are we going to go with IAL, or are we going to have a GCSE and then IAL-oriented class? And it took probably, that process in germination probably took 5 to 6 years, because it really takes a long time to do the studies on it, to try to get the personnel, to look at costs, to look at your physical plant to see if you can actually do it. And we eventually was decided that we'd go down the IAL road. And in the past, then during Mr. Dennis Yun's time is really when it started. He made the decision, we're going to go forward with this. And that was 2016, 2017. And then the first year was 2018, then 2019, and the first graduating class was last year. And those boys did really exceptionally well. So we're very pleased for them.
So do you have any difficulties in organizing this program?
Yeah, yeah, plenty of difficulties. Because you're starting something from nothing, it's going to be you don't understand the system. You know, everybody here understands the DSE. It's really very clear. But if you don't understand the system beforehand, it makes for a big problem. And really, we didn't understand the system very well.
Final exam.
Yeah, so I understand, Ryan, you answered St. Paul's and Thornton. And why would you choose to take the IEL instead of the DSE curriculum?
Because I have a really big dream when I was young. I always wanted to put some effort and time into computer science, and I really believe that Hong Kong is not a great place for me to invest that time here. So I would like to spend my time overseas studying and communicating with other like-minded people like myself, and we hope we can achieve great things in the world.
So how about you?
Since I'm I used to be very good at some science subjects, so when I decided to get into this school, I decided to because I'm not very good at something like religion studies and those stuff, so I choose to in higher level. So because so I can got my advantage in the science subjects.
The major difference between IEL and DSE is that there's a lot of freedom in IEL because we don't have a lot of homework to do, such as in DSE, and we don't have other subjects like liberal studies, and it's sort of really the teachers let us to do and explore our interest in different areas in science subjects, and sometimes our teacher may pull up some aspects besides teaching that particular subject. For example, in chemistry, our lovely chem teacher, she always likes to share some chem knowledge outside our textbooks to us, and really wants us to understand or invest our time into studying about the beauty of chemistry.
You can talk about that, but in fact, if you take 6F last year and 6F this year, they're actually, because they spend all their time together, they're like the old A-level classes before that spent all their time together. And when you talk to the old boys about their experience, if they were in, for example, 6C and 7C together, they really have a strong allegiance to that particular class as much as to St. Paul's generally. These guys have that, whereas the students who are in 6A, B, C, D, E, they might take a number of their classes with different students from different classes.
Yeah.
So they don't have the same brotherhood maybe as these guys who take it all together. So in some ways they're more like an old AL student than a DSE student.
So, Mr. Ryan, is there any future expectations about IEL course, like involve more humanities or having more classes?
This is a really good question. It now has become that the competition for places in the IAL class, there's not enough places for the students who wish to get into the IAL classes. But in schools in Hong Kong, primarily it has to be a DSE school. So there's only a certain number who are able to do the IAL. And again, the IAL is not for everyone. It's really for the students who, you know, when Ryan was speaking, he recognized and his family recognized very early on that Chinese was going to be a problem for him if he did the GCSE. Yet, you know, he's quite skilled in math science. Vincent, the same thing, but his was English, and yet very skilled in math science. It's really for those guys, almost like the old A levels. If you take the current GCSE, you have to be good at Chinese, English, liberal studies, and maths. But in fact, a lot of our guys aren't good at those. They're good at Phi, Chem, Bi, and maths. And that's who the IAL is for. And for a lot of guys, they recognize at the end of Form 3, look, Chinese or English or whatever it is isn't for me. But I am good at maths and science, or I have a passion for it. You don't necessarily have to be great at it, but you do have to have a passion for it. And we're lucky. We've got families that recognize what their son's strengths are in, and they try to maximize his opportunities.